Today's episode is brought to you by HelloFresh. Do you feel like you're stuck in a dinner rut? With HelloFresh, you get fresh, pre-measured ingredients with mouth-watering seasonal recipes delivered right to your door. Skip all those trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. You can now enjoy cooking and get dinner on the table in 30 minutes or less. With over 25 recipes to choose from each week, there's something for everyone to enjoy. All recipes are designed and tested by professional chefs and nutritional experts to ensure deliciousness and simplicity. With meals like the sweet and smoky pork tenderloin, you're definitely going to have a crowd favorite. Go to our link in our show notes to get $80 off, including free shipping on HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit. Welcome. I'm Lori Lee Binstock, host of a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and according to a German study, about 80% of women diagnosed with early-stage disease had symptoms of PTSD between the time they were diagnosed and the start of treatment. My guest today is Rosie Mankes, a life coach and author of Find Your Joy and Run With It. It's a heartwarming memoir about overcoming her second battle with cancer. Rosie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you have endured 2 cancer diagnoses, lung and breast. As a survivor, did you experience PTSD symptoms from either or both?
You know, both of my cancers were found in early stages, but I will say that having your breast removed is very, very personal as opposed to a part of your lung. Not to say that lung cancer is not significant. Of course it is, but having my breast removed caused a lot of anxiety, a lot of PTSD, and a lot of things happened that year besides the breast cancer. And it was a very, very hard year for me.
What type of symptoms did you experience with PTSD?
So it's funny that today is actually 6 years to the day that I actually had a mammogram that was suspicious. And my cancer was a stage 0 breast cancer, which if you're going to have breast cancer, stage 0 is the best one to have. I also tested positive for a breast cancer gene, not BRCA, but another one called CHEK2 that was indicative that I was more than 50% likely to have an invasive stage breast cancer had I not had the mastectomy. But getting back to your question, so after I had the mastectomy, one of the hardest things was looking down in the mirror and seeing that, the breasts were not there. I was really, really just so broken by it. I had social anxiety. I was afraid to go and see people that I hadn't seen since before my surgery because my experience, and maybe not perhaps others, was that when I would see people afterwards, some of them, not all of them, would look down at my breasts first before looking in my eyes. And it made me feel uncomfortable, different, and changed. And also some of the people that I would see after the mastectomy, instead of saying, "How are you?" they'd say, "I heard what happened." So the way that I worked through that was if I knew I was going to be with people that I hadn't seen in a while, I would actually rehearse my encounter with them. I would visualize their faces, because obviously I knew who they were, visualize what they might say, and then rehearse like what my response would be. So they kind of took like the helium out of the balloon or the gas out of a chamber and kind of made it easier for me to power through these encounters.
You said it was stage 0. Was that because you were doing just regular testing, or was there something that made you want to get a mammogram where you said something's not right?
So I was going through yearly screening, which is recommended for women that are over 50. And every year, my friends and I we'd make a day of it. We'd go to get our mammograms, and we used to go in Montclair, New Jersey, and then we'd go out to lunch. So it was a thing. And then other friends would join us, and just because it was always in September, it was always a lovely day. And then that day, as many days, I was called back in for more screening because I had breasts that were very dense and had cystic and whatnot. So for me, it was just like, well, okay, this is just what happens to me. And that day, the doctor pointed out 6 dots on the mammogram. They were in like an arc. It was kind of looked like the Orion's belt, if you look at a constellation in the sky. And she said, these are calcifications. Not really worried about them, 80-20 against cancer, but I think we should do some biopsies. And I was like, okay, because, this is my breasts were cystic and this is what happened. And it turned out that it was the early stage cancer. And at the beginning, the recommendation was we would just do careful screening every 6 months. But once I tested positive for, at that time, it was like a newly created screening called Check 2, and it shared that I had over a 50% chance of developing an invasive stage cancer. Doctors said, no, we can't take that chance. You need to have a double mastectomy. And I fell apart, literally fell apart, because I was really afraid to lose that part of myself. And, this part of it, that's part of your feminine identity, but it's just a very personal, part of your body that to lose. It's the part that you see when you get out of the shower every day. If you have, as I had stage 1A lung cancer, and I had 10% of my right lung removed back in 2008. But, and that was a very difficult surgery to recover from because they had to crack and spread my ribs to get there. But it was not as personal in the sense that, when you don't see your lungs, you don't look down at you and see your lungs the way you do your breasts.
Wow. You did talk about how you would prepare yourself for the anxiety that would come up in seeing people and having them respond and, oh, I heard what happened. Did you seek other support groups, therapists?
So I did. So there was 3 very significant things that happened to me that year. It was September of 2015 to September of 2016. During that year, not only did I have the breast cancer and the mastectomy and reconstructive surgery, but my mom had to be transitioned into an assisted living facility due to the progression of her dementia. And she was very fearful and resistant. And the people the staff at the place said it was the hardest transition that they had ever seen in all of their experience. And then I had the surgery, as I shared. But then just when things were starting to settle down, my 58-year-old brother died in a horrific accident. And I fell apart. And my friends didn't think I was coming back after my brother's death. And that's when I realized I couldn't do it alone. So I went and I saw a therapist in December of 2016. I like limped and crawled into her office and was so broken. And she really helped me to get back to starting to want to be me again and working on that. And I also, during that time, I decided that I wanted to become a life coach because I knew that what I had gone through. And I said, if I can figure out, as I started to work through my stuff and my building of who I was and who I was before and where I wanted to get back to, and not just to survive, but to thrive and find joy in everyday living. So I started to work on my journey towards that with the therapist and also within myself, so that then I could help other people that were going through significant adversity and just feeling despondent and despair and working to become emotionally whole again.
Wow, it just seemed like that was the year, like that saying, when it rains, it pours.
It really was. And the way my brother died was he was very active in local theater, and he was rehearsing for a play with his castmates. And imagine like you and I are on a stage, and let's say you asked me to carry a table off the stage. So you're walking forward with the table, and I'm walking backwards, and he walked off a 3.5-foot stage and backwards and hit his head on the cement and died. Well, he didn't die instantly. He was brain dead. And then they took him off life support when the family arrived. Our whole family went down to South Carolina where he lived to say goodbye. And then they took him off life support. So it was just a very traumatic experience.
Wow, it sounds like there was just so much that happened that year, and in just a very traumatic fashion. Um, were you able, you said you did see this therapist helped you become whole again. Was there anything in particular that you worked on to work through, or was it talk therapy? Was it just someone you needed to speak to get through all of this?
So she helped me to really embrace the grief, to write about it, to journal about it, to, if I was angry, to, punch a pillow or scream or just whatever it was that I needed to do. But I, on my own, also needed to see if I could define what happy meant again. We all talk about blessings, right? So I have a bracelet I wear. It's called the Blessings Bracelet. Every morning, it has 4 beads on it. Every morning I acknowledge 4 blessings in my life. But for me to get back to being a me again and whole, I needed to define what happy meant, because I was just not happy. There was just so much anxiety, and I was trying to figure that out. So one day I sat with my journal and I decided to write down 5 things that make me happy. And I looked at the page and there wasn't anything, right? So I said, let me take a step back and write 5 things that used to make me happy. And I came up with this really basic list that, really simple things, like sitting on the couch with the dogs snuggled next to me, feeling the warmth of them, and, like lighting candles and turning lights to watch them glimmer, or drinking my favorite morning beverage, really savoring the taste, of sunrise or sunset. And even just taking a walk around the block, because, at that point, when I was going through this whole surgical journey, that, around the block was the most I could do. But then I was like, well, there's a list of things that used to make me happy. How do I turn them into things that make me happy, right? So I turned them into affirmations, and I would say them every day and believe that, like, I could work on integrating those simple things back into my life. And then I did. And then once I did those 5, I worked on another. The other thing I did also was I took a look at things I gave up during that horrible year. And one of the things I gave up is I stopped turning on the radio, because I couldn't believe in listening to music and that, like, I could connect to the lyrics or sing along, because it just was not, I was struggling. But music is so important to me. Like I probably needed it more than ever before. So I worked on integrating music back into my life slowly. Like I said, well, what's the first I could do? Maybe listen to songs from when I was a teenager and life was simpler, right? So I put songs by Billy Joel or by Jim Croce back into my life. And then I was like, well, okay, what about songs that just make you happy, like this September by Earth, Wind and Fire? Everybody jumps up to dance on the dance floor when that one comes on, right? And then I went for the gusto. I went for the songs where the lyrics really spoke to me, like Let It Be or Drops to Jupiter by Train, and put them in. And now, music is just a part of my life. When in the morning, when I put my makeup on, music is playing. When I'm cooking, music is playing. So I sing and I dance along, So it was things like that, like looking and examining the things I lost during that year, also my behavior during that year, like what I didn't like about it and how I could change. So I really took a real soul searching kind of introspective look at where I was there and where I wanted to become.
Wow.
And those are just a couple of things that I did.
It's so funny how the simplest things, like a sunset or a sunrise, can really change your perspective when you're really enjoying those things. Because these things happen every day. We can enjoy them every single day, but we always forget to, especially when things are hectic, even though those are the times we should be really enjoying it.
Agree. Totally agree. I wanted to share also that one of the game changers for me was, at first I thought I would never be able to meditate because I have a very busy brain that's always on overdrive. But when I started to get to that deep level of connectivity with meditation, it was like, wow, I can't believe how soothing this is. But I think the bigger thing was when I found mindfulness. And that was like a real game changer for me, and how I live my life now and how I share with my clients. And when I do speeches, it's just like this whole thought of how, I used to like worry about the past and plot and plan and scheme the future. And sometimes, the best place to be is where your feet are right then in the moment. Right. So I give this example, I'll share with you. So like when I used to go out walking before I started practicing being present in the moment, it was my me time, right? So it was an hour that it was just me alone walking. And before being mindful and present, I'd be like looking at my phone and, answering a text or checking an email or, a lot of busy stuff. And then when I decided, wait, this is my time, why am I doing that? So when I go out now, and for the past several years for a walk, my phone goes on do not disturb. I take it because God forbid there's an accident or whatever. And then I look up at the blue sky and I look at the cloud formations and I watch the sun pierce through the clouds. And for me, in my spiritual way, I feel like that's our loved ones that are no longer here, shining a light down so that we see their presence. And I listen for the birds chirping and the trees swaying. And I really try to stay with that. And especially one of the gifts that came back to me that I never expected was I started, after having been a lung cancer survivor, I started to be able to run again. And I'm running with, I walk, run, but I run with like so much mindfulness. I listen to my feet hitting the ground and feeling proud that I actually can do this, after having survived something like the 2 cancers, actually, to be able to be with myself in that moment and running mindfully. So it just feels just like a really, really beautiful gift that was given to me, mindfulness, that is, and having it brought to my life.
It's funny that you say that, because before I'm a child abuse, sexual abuse survivor, and I've always been living in survival mode since I was a child up until last year. And everyone always talks about mindfulness and meditation. I'm like, I'm too busy for that. My head, I need a thing, when, after you do yoga and exercise, they give you like a few minutes to meditate. And during that time, I was like, I don't have time to just be mindful. I have to think of the list I need to do for that day.
Right.
But when I went into treatment, it just blew my mind how different my life was when I actually paid attention to everything that was around me instead of being in my head the entire time. So I completely agree with you there. Um, you wrote this book, Find Your Joy and Run with It. What made you want to write this book?
So I was, in this space trying to figure out how to heal. And I would journal. And I was lucky that I was introduced to journaling because it really became the framework of the book. But the story that's interesting is that in my career, I interfaced with some producers and whatever. And this guy, a producer friend of mine, called to ask me to make an introduction to somebody at a company. And I said, sure. And he said, what's going on with you? And I shared what had happened to me. And he said, wow, what a story. I think you should write this. I think you should write a book. So he kind of dared me to do it. And I did it. And he was like, this is great. He's like, he read it. He's like, wow, what a job you've done. So, the book, it's about that journey. It's about how those significantly difficult things happen to me. But the focus is, how do you find your joy? How do you find your joy and get back? And through the book, I share these they're kind of like life coach lessons. And at the end of the chapters, there's things that I share. And people strangers, of course, have said to me that they've taken what I share in the book and implemented it and put it into their life. And it's helped them through difficult things in their lives. And I was like, wow, I wrote this to be cathartic, right? I mean, I thought it was just going to be something for me. But then when people started to share how it helped them, I said, wow, I think I did something that I didn't expect to do, and it was just, wow. I was just amazed by the feedback I was getting. Mostly people will say that they sat down thinking on that rainy day, I was going to read a couple chapters and then go clean out my closet, and they read the whole thing through. And that was another amazing thing. I said, wow, that was amazing to me. So, so here we are, I'm sharing my story so that I can somehow, however I was able to get through it and process it to help others that might feel that they are in need, or they're on an earlier part of their journey, that I can maybe help them to make their way through.
And I can assume that that's why you became a life coach, just figuring out like, this is what I've been through, and I went through it and I came out the other side. Um,
Yes.
what is this life coaching that you're doing? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So, so my, the space that I like to stay in the most is when people are diagnosed with cancer, and more specifically breast cancer. I remember myself at that beginning stages that the best thing that happened to me was when women that had been maybe a couple of years out were willing to have a conversation with me. And I actually just recently found out that somebody just was diagnosed, and she's very fearful and she's crying, and she wants to work with me through the whole process. So that's the place where I really genuinely feel that I give value. And when I started to do that with people, that's when I started to heal. I think it's when you start to heal is when you help others, right? When you can help
Right.
others in some way to make it through a difficult journey.
Wow. What message do you have for others who have been diagnosed with cancer or other diseases?
I would say that it's going to take time. You need to be kind to yourself. There's a lot of self-care that's involved in it. I do say that if you feel that you need help, you should seek out professional help, whatever that looks like to you. It could be a life coach, it could be a therapist. And that just really to be with yourself when you're, sad, you need to journal or whatever you might need to do. And don't do it alone. Whoever your people are, rely on your people. I had very good people. I happen to have a very good support system of friends. I have my husband and my children. So be with your people and tell them what's going on. I would also say for myself, one of the things that I wish I knew back then that I now know is that if this is your personal journey and you don't want it to be shared, to make sure that you tell your people that this is personal, because I had an experience where I shared, and the person I shared it with shared it throughout the town, and everybody knew. And it wasn't something I wanted people to know. It was very personal.
Mhm.
And that's something I would want people to know, is that to think about what you want people to know about your story or what you don't want to know, and be very specific with your people about that.
Yeah, that's great. And to be honest, all the information that you gave about how you got through it with being mindful and, finding your joy, figuring out what are the things that you did before things kind of got messy. I mean, to be honest, I think I'm going to start doing that just from hearing you. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Just to add about the mindfulness, is one of the other things I wanted to share, is that, when you have the opportunity to be with special people in your life, like for instance, your significant other or your friend or a cousin, and you're sharing like a meal with them and you're having that time, and you shared about your mind being busy too. So maybe I get busy brain and I start casting out and thinking of, oh, I could have done this better earlier today, or tonight I have to do this, whatever. Is like, I have trained myself to come back and stay exactly where my feet are planted and be with that person, because what I always say is I don't want to miss the beautiful gift of now, like right then in that moment. And once I train myself to do that during special occasions, the realization hit me that it didn't just have to be during special times. It could be throughout my day to day. And so like if I'm out walking and I'm lucky enough to see children playing, what I'll do is I'll just turn my attention to the beautiful gift of their laughter, and then, like if I'm busy, I'm juggling so many things with work, and a friend calls and she's struggling with something, to just push my stuff aside for a while and be with her. We're doing random acts of kindness, which I love to do because you get back tenfold when you do that. But once I train myself to stay in that space, in my day-to-day life, it became so much more. It wasn't just 4 blessings that I was receiving each day from my bracelet. It became multiple blessings throughout my day-to-day. And that's such a powerful gift. So when I share my story of mindfulness and people say, oh, I can't do that, I'm like, you can. I mean, you just have to go back to what I said earlier, the fundamentals, like sipping your beverage in the morning and just really tasting how good it is. That's the start of it. Or even just go out to a park and close your eyes and just listen, to the birds and the crickets, and then the swaying of the trees or the leaves, and then just like open your eyes and then see. And once you build from that little spot, and you start to incorporate those things in your day, the rest will come. You just have to allow them to come. And that's really what I like to share about what I've learned, from going from anxiety and despair and despondency to incorporating that into my life, and starting very slowly, but how you can have joy in every single day of your life. And that's, of course, you're going to have bad days. Of course, everybody does, right? So,
Right.
But you can find something that's joyful in every day.
Right. Yeah, I love that. And I think that is probably the best thing somebody can do, because let's say you are with somebody and you're thinking of other things, then probably the next day you'll be like, oh, I wasn't paying attention to what was happening right in front of me. And I was with somebody I love and just enjoying some time. And,
Right. Exactly.
I love that, and I feel like I need to do more, but let me tell you, when I started and I did it, I made it a habit every day, it just came natural.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Because we have choices, right? So I could allow my busy brain to hijack my special time with that person, or I can choose, and the operative word is choose, to be with that person in that moment. And then the next day you won't have, as you said, those regrets about, what you were making your busy brain take over.
Absolutely. Rosie, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story and, doing what you're doing to help others, especially people who have gone through, similar, diagnosis of cancer like you, because, when we share our story, it gives other people kind of permission to share their stories and seek out help. And I think that that's a wonderful thing that you're doing.
Thank you. And thanks for having me on. And I think what you're doing is wonderful as well. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Me too. Thank you so much.
That was Rosie Mankes, life coach and author of Find Your Joy and Run With It. To learn more about Rosie, visit my website, ptsdpodcast.com. That's the letter A, ptsdpodcast.com. There you can find the link to purchase her book, and you can also find my social media platforms at the top of my homepage. Rosie has also contributed to October's issue of Authentic Insider, which you can find at my website, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to my email list to get Authentic Insider magazine in your inbox monthly. You've been listening to a Trauma Survivor Thrivers podcast. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. I'm Lori Lee Binstock. Take care.